CNN's Jim Acosta has positioned himself as the chief tween poetry writer for the Washington Press Corps. Of all of the whiny journalists, and oh my gosh, there are many of them, he really does stand head and shoulders above them all as the one most likely to fight back tears while he asks Sarah Sanders questions about mean old Trump. Often he takes to Twitter to declare just how bravely he stared down the death of democracy. Other times he does little more than crying. Listen, Variety did this whole piece about journalists and all of this stuff, dangerous, and he acts like he's serving in a war zone. Listen to him talking about the, quote, toxic environment that the president has created. Listen.
There's that natural tension that exists between the journalists and the press and the people that we're covering, but it was never like this. We were never called fake news. We were never called the enemy of the people. And that, I think, just created a totally different climate and environment that we're all sort of trying to make sense of and trying to figure out how do we cover the news in that kind of toxic environment.
Well, you're talking, is he, what? If you have at all been, if you've been paying attention at all the past previous 8 years, then you would have known that this goes way far beyond Jim Acosta. I mean, the previous administration, by the way, the previous administration actually used the DOJ to persecute reporters. I mean, a friend of mine, James Rosen, who I actually am reading one of his books about Buckley's eulogies that he had sent over. It's a great book. But I mean, the DOJ went after him. They subpoenaed they actually wiretapped his parents' phone. They persecuted journalists, right? And so I don't know why Jim Acosta thinks that when you call fake news stories, and there are quite a few fake news stories, and there are quite a few instances in which networks are promoting and perpetuating this cycle of false stories, which gave birth to the fake news thing. You can't really be whiny about that, right? Because you can't really, maybe perhaps if you were doing your due diligence, then the president would have never have need to remark about any of this. I mean, his whole shtick presupposes that there is no legitimate at all whatsoever criticism that anybody would ever have against the media. I mean, this is the same media that has been blasting Tea Party groups, the same media that blasts female firearm owners, the same media that tries to skew and push bias through omission. Honestly, I mean, he has a ton of whiny moments. He really does. We put a handy montage together for you, by the way, of the whiniest moments of Jim Acosta. Check it out.
The White House press secretary is getting to a point, Brooke, where he's just kind of useless.
The Statue of Liberty has always been
let me ask you a question.
Of hope to the world, for people to send
do you believe
people to this country, and they're not always going to speak English, Stephen.
As I tried to ask whether he wanted more people to come in just from white or Caucasian countries, he said out. He pointed at me and said out, as in get out of the Oval Office.
You and the president are saying now, well, we don't mean wiretapping anymore, because that's not true anymore. So now we're going to expand that to other forms of surveillance. What's it going to be next?
I think President Trump, Brooke, now has the world record for injecting politics into the aftermath of a terror attack.
Mr. President, what about the DACA kids? Should they worry about what's going to happen to them, sir? Didn't you kill DACA, sir?
If he can't come out and answer the questions and they're just not going to do this on camera or audio, why are we even having these briefings or these gaggles in the first place?
I like how everyone looks at him. It's kind of the reaction that I have as well. Oh, Jim Acosta, you know, I kind of enjoy having him in there in the gaggles because and by the way, when he was screaming, what about the DACA kids? That was at the White House Easter egg roll.